Hi, welcome. How are you, everybody? Welcome to Eat, Play, Chug podcast. I'm Josh Levy, joined on a very, very lovely day with my co-host, Vince. Vince, how are you, man, my friend?
Doing well. Able to get to the cold brew this morning. So if it comes out quick, fast, ugly, I apologize.
Of course, he's talking about his words, everybody, as they always come out quick, ugly, and fast. Baseball headlines that surfaced this week about some people, some character names coming back into the public sphere. Not in a good way, though. Not in a good way. And the first one we'll start talking about is Tony La Russa making headlines again. He quickly inked a deal with the White Sox, and then quickly reverted back to old behavior, and unfortunately got pulled over for DUI.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable circumstances, right? We know about Tony La Russa in the past. I mean, first, I think just him being hired in general, right, caught a lot of people off guard. People didn't really know where he was. I believe he was working with the Angels in regards to like analytics and being a special advisor. Obviously, we all know, right? He had his run when he was on the A's as manager, on the Cardinals as manager, winning World Series at both of those organizations. And then his best friend is actually Jerry Reinsdorf, who not only owns the Chicago Bulls but owns the Chicago White Sox. So, with that being said, I think it makes a lot of sense that Tony La Russa is in. It reminds me of. If you remember, and I believe this is early days of the Marlins, and I can't remember the exact team, but this is with Edgar Renteria, Jeff Conine, Miguel Cabrera as a rookie, Jack McKeon. Jack McKeon was an older gent then with a very young roster. The Chicago White Sox are a very young roster with an unbelievably star talent in regards to Luis Robert. And so I think Jerry's thinking that same way, right? If we bring kind of more the father figure in and kind of help these young guys through, this would be his chance of having that, if you will, Jack McKeon-like approach with Tony La Russa. But certainly that's from a baseball perspective, right? I think there's more when it comes to now what we're talking about with his DUIs, which he had one back in 2007 in Jupiter, Florida, and now what he has one once again, right, the day before he signs with the White Sox. And I think just the weirdest part of all this, if you really go back and you got to look at some of these quotes that he had, he's talking about, as we all say, right? I only had one glass of wine at dinner with my friends. I think I've told my girlfriend that probably 10 or 15 times by now. But, when you're talking to a police officer after being pulled over and saying, do you see my ring? Like, I'm a Hall of Fame baseball person. I'm legit. I'm a Hall of Famer brother. You're trying to embarrass me. I don't know if there's anything more embarrassing for Tony La Russa than that. At this point, I really don't see how you can continue with him as your manager. But yet again, right, maybe that Jerry Reinsdorf connection keeps him there. But at this point in time, I just don't see how he could be the manager of the White Sox moving forward.
Yeah, this guy's track record isn't sterling in any sense at any angle. I mean, he was a great manager. Let's give him his his due. But he ran into trouble in 2007. Like you said, he got a DUI, and that was, I mean, over 10 years ago. However, the guy's blood alcohol content was 3 times the driving rate or something ridiculous like that. So he kind of went away, and then he got a job again with the Angels and completely destroyed the scouting department there, and then went to the White Sox. And he also has allegations there of cheating by stealing signs there. Yet, I mean, I guess this is just another one of those cheating scandals that'll go under the radar and kind of get no attention, media attention. But we're going to cover it, Vince, because it's kind of ridiculous. All of the grandstanding of the 90s, the 2000s of people cheating using steroids, kind of trying to isolate it to a few players for looking a little bit too big, and not fairly administering the same treatment over generations of people, like in the 70s using greenies, or this year the balls are being juiced, and pitchers now are allegedly using grip substance enhancers. But I just can't believe now that Tony La Russa not only got a job after all of this recently, but on top of that, not a few days later, gets pulled over for another DUI. And as we speak right now, still has his job.
Yeah. I, I don't know how he's going to keep it. It's pretty unbelievable where, that they even hired him knowing that he had it because it was one day prior to him being signed. I just still think it goes back to, right, there's a personal relationship with Jerry Reinsdorf. I think Jerry also sees, like I mentioned previously, right, it's the Jack McKeon effect. I think Jack was 72, and this is back in 2003 when the Marlins won the World Series, right? It was a very young roster. I think that's really what he's looking at, but you know how it goes, right? You probably have someone like La Russa already going up for the Hall of Fame, or I believe he's already in, right? So then now he's kind of restarting this clock, if you will. But under these circumstances, you'd have to say that he gets fired.
I just don't understand. Like, if you're a White Sox fan, you've got everything going for you right now. You've got a young team, you've got an exciting team, you've got a really good team, and you want to screw it all up with this PR media nonsense. I don't understand it whatsoever. There's plenty more talent you could pry away from other teams. For instance, you have Ron Washington over in Atlanta, who's looking for a managerial position. He's revered by players. I just don't understand what they're doing, and it's a shame. All right, and speaking of questionable hires, Alex Cora is back on the Red Sox, and all I can say is, what?
Yeah, I think all of us were kind of shocked by this. There's twofold to this, right? There's one, him basically, being suspended, pleading guilty, if you will, right? Everyone knows he did it. Right. I understand it. Like AJ Hinch gets hired. It's with a different organization, right? It's a different franchise. To be rehired by the same one again, kind of on the Red Sox, it's like, I understand the punishment came down from the MLB, but you kind of want to turn the chapter from that, right? You don't want to be always questioned around, hey, are you doing it again, right? Because those questions are going to come back. There's no doubt. The other thing was, what was interesting by the Red Sox on this, I don't know if you caught this, okay? So they kind of sneakily hired Alex Cora. They didn't really tell us about it. In fact, you could almost say they hid the hire, and they did it with perfection, just as the presidential election was being decided, right? So I think at the time, it was within a difference of 20 minutes, right? So basically Biden was projected to win. That came out, from the decision desk, right? I would say 15, 20 minutes later, you had John Heyman breaking the news that Alex Cora is back as the Red Sox manager. Like, who would have even saw it, right? Because this monumental change, from Trump to Biden. And then you have Alex Cora just kind of being thrown under, let's just get it under there. No one will see
those
it.
Bastards try to sneak it right by us.
Absolutely. I mean, who, did they think that we would be in spring training and not see Alex Cora running?
Yeah. And not everybody
position?
has infinite amounts of energy. It's like, I can only focus my anger on one thing at a time. I mean,
yeah,
this is reprehensible, and it's by the same team. And his statement said that he wasn't proud of his actions. So my question is, how do you lead a group of grown-ass men?
I mean, I don't see how you can, but like, you should not be surprised by this with the organization who trades bets to the Dodgers, for chicken scratch, right? And Butland. Like, this is nothing. They got Alex Verdugo back.
Verdugo,
He's a decent player.
Yeah.
Decent player. I know they got the other individual back. He's the shortstop. I forget his name. He's a good prospect. But Mookie Betts is like a top 5 player, changing franchises, easily adding to the 10-year run of the Dodgers. I mean, in a player, as you saw, right, you signed for 5 years, $300 million. Like, that's the type of player Mookie is: defense, offense, and as well, adding to the culture, a great cultural fit. So to me, it's like you subtract a great cultural fit in Mookie Betts and you bring back
the issue that you were trying to remove yourself from in Alex Cora. So the message just doesn't match up.
Yeah, you can't be happy if you're a Red Sox fan. I mean, to their credit, Mookie Betts was looking for an historic contract. He did end up getting that. So with 1 year left on his expiring contract, the Red Sox, I think, made out like bandits in a sense, because they traded him away in his last season expecting, to give up a full season's worth of Mookie Betts. And yes, he did help the Dodgers win the World Series. But I think the Red Sox organization knew that they weren't going to be good this year. And they kind of made out on the better side of that trade, I think, because of the shortened 2020 season and with no commitment to extend a contract offer anywhere in the realm of Mookie Betts' asking price. I think they made out pretty well with the shortstop. Oh, I forget his name. And Alex Verdugo. Yeah. He's a pretty solid player.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about this thing that the Red Sox can't pay for players. I think that's the biggest load of BS of all time. The Red Sox are owned by one of the wealthiest owners in baseball, John Henry.
It's fair.
He owns the Liverpool Football Club. He owns the Boston Red Sox. He owns the Boston Globe. He's a co-owner of Roush Fenway Racing. I mean, I think he's got a net worth of over $3 billion. Like, this is one of the prestigious, like, one of the clubs that everyone wants to play for, right? It's either like you want to play for the Yankees, you want to play for the Dodgers, you want to play for the Giants, you want to play for the Red Sox. Like, the Red Sox spend money. And now that they're saying, like, oh, hey, we couldn't afford a Mookie Betts, give me a break. Give me a break. I don't see this as like a cost-cutting thing. This is, call it what it is. You're rebuilding. You're completely rebuilding,
right? And
you didn't want to pay it, and that's fine. But, like, if you're going to come out and want fans to, to be watching your sport, to be watching your team, to be, seats in the butts, obviously when available, buying your merchandise, you got to pay the player. I mean, that's the only way you're going to continue to have them back. And instead, you decided to bring on like JD Martinez, right, and give him the ability to opt into his 2-year, which he's going to take, and not pay arguably a top 5 player in the MLB at current day.
Yeah, and what I think I want to tie this back into is that, and it's what supports this argument is the Alex Cora signing. I think it's organizational hubris. I think they know that they can do whatever they want, and their fans are gonna come watch and spend money. And it's a real shame if you're a Red Sox fan. You can't be happy with the Alex Cora signing. With the Alex Cora signing. And everything that's happened this season with Rob Manfred, how is this not the last straw for Rob Manfred? I just don't understand how many more negative PR headlines the MLB can sustain, especially with the poor TV ratings, the drastic decrease in revenues. I think the Braves just released their Q3 revenues, and it was down by 66% from last year. What will it take for Manfred to lose his job?
I honestly don't know. I say that because the ultimate cockroach is Roger Goodell, right? Roger Goodell got through 5 gates, right? I know there was the Adrian Peterson child abuse. There was the camera gate. I forget the actual name of it. With the Pats, there were multiple instances where Goodell had really screwed up, right? And at the end of the day, all the owners cared about was that he was able to be the first line of defense and take on all the brutality of any PR stance or so forth. And then in return, right, he was making the NFL a ton of money. At that time, ratings were all-time highs, right? This is obviously pre-COVID. They were absolutely exploding. So he was doing fantastic in that, which then, as you see, right, they've kind of stepped back from their whole BLM stance and kind of, Cap, come on back in and all of that, right? And he's still even got through all of that to where now they're apologizing to Cap, and he's still there, right? And he still has his position. But Manfred, is different. I think Manfred's like, this is the time where he needs to go. If we really look at the origin of Manfred prior to being a commissioner was a labor lawyer. Okay. So what was the first thing that happened, in regards to getting the 2020 season started, right? It was a labor disagreement, right? This is where Manfred should have thrived. I mean, I understand on the on the reverse side, when you're talking about the Players Association, you have someone like Tony Clark, who I agree, and I've stated in previous episodes, needs to be fired as well. But if your like origin of existence is labor law, this is something you should, with expert knowledge, should be able to handle and find a way to find common ground. That's the first thing. Then you have the things around, right, calling the World Series trophy a piece of steel, letting the Marlins going and playing in the beginning of the season when there were 7 or 8 players that had COVID and still allowed that game to go through. And then, obviously the one that we talked about the most, and I went on my, and brought an analogy to the table, around Manfred being the parent and Justin Turner being the child. Certainly that whole situation, which in my eyes is the most fireable offense of them all. But I know there's some new stuff coming out, right, around the Astros owner and the punishments that they've handed out there as well.
Yeah, the leadership needs to change all around. I mean, how I view baseball's leadership is how I view the government. I feel like the government is there to set rules and enforce them. And then in Tony Clark's position, he's a representative of the players. He's supposed to represent the players, and he's not. Tony Clark, I've been critical of him as well, as much as I have been critical of Rob Manfred. I mean, he had the ability to strike a deal with Manfred so he's just as responsible as Rob Manfred. They had the opportunity to come back early, be the first sport to come back during the start of the whole world locking down, to be a great distraction, to be a great message to the American public, saying we're not going to let this whole thing decimate our franchise, our league, and our traditions. And he wasn't able to strike a deal either. I mean, he unfairly, in my opinion, was expecting prorated contract payments to players based off of the amount of games played during the season. Now, that's fine if we had fans in the stands, because the number one way for teams to draw in revenue is to have fans buying tickets, butts in the seats. And we weren't able to have that. And for Tony Clark to demand money that's not being generated, I think does everybody a disservice. Not just the players, but the fans, because it prevents the players from playing on the field. And that's all we want. That's all we wanted. So let's blame Rob Manfred for doing a lot of bad, for what he's done bad, but also let's blame Tony Clark for what he's done bad as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have players that are sitting out. Look at like Buster Posey, right? He adopted 2 young children, so he's obviously stepped out and didn't want to play within that. You have multiple teams, those players, right, not wanting to play. I mean, let's talk about, right, in that Betts trade, David Price was part of that, right? And I think that goes under the radar too, because he decided.
I didn't realize that. I forgot about that.
Right after the news conference, he decided not to play, right? So, to me, it's a lot of this. It's a lot of their own agendas, right? It's Manfred's agenda, it's Tony Clark's agenda, but it's not an agenda that is around saying, hey, this is for the greater good, right? It's very much, this is what I deem is right. This is what we should be doing. This is kind of what I want to foresee going through, without actually hearing, the majority. And certainly the majority wanted to play baseball, and the majority didn't want to continue to go through these labor disagreements. And with these 2 people at the helm, they couldn't simply even negotiate what an agreement looked like for common ground to come back to the table and actually have some baseball. And it took them, I think it was over 2 or 3 months finally to do it. but I believe, right, there had to be some outside intervening just to make sure that this could even happen.
Yeah. So just for comparison's sake, let's just compare the failure of Rob Manfred and the failure of Roger Goodell to some good examples of good commissioners like David Stern, who combined the ABA and the NBA and created the global brand and brought in China. And during his 30-year tenure from 1984 to 2014, he took the NBA from a 23-team organization struggling to make a profit to a 30-team operation whose revenues increased by 30 times to a reported $5 billion. He helped boost its attraction by expanding its presence outside the United States through marketing and television broadcasts in more than 200 countries and regions and in 49 different languages. See, that's great leadership.
Yeah, I think David Stern by far is the best commissioner when it comes to sports. I know a lot of people don't exactly approve of him, but if you think about during his tenure, right, you're talking about a sport that was really just solely based in the United States. To then when a player like Michael Jordan steps in, right, he's able to be internationally marketed, right? So all the way to China, creating this global brand, and then having where, the outside say shoes from the standpoint of those types of sponsorships and so forth. So Nike in this instance, right, with Jordan, then you have this whole thing around creating Air Jordan, right? Which then Air Jordan catches on. So all of this stems back to David Stern creating this in a global game, having players that are marketable globally, but then as well bringing in this way of like now shoes, where the NBA, if you look at today, right, the NBA is somewhat run by Nike, right? Because really LeBron James has $1 billion deal with Nike. So you have Nike kind of being the top of the NBA, which then Nike is answering to China, right? So that was the whole thing around kind of in the beginning where they had the disagreements around Hong Kong and so forth, and how that
Hong
created
Kong.
an issue with the NBA losing money. But from that perspective,
Because where are
right,
Nikes made, right? Where are Nikes made?
exactly. And that just shows you how like global of a game this is, to how much revenue, right, was lost just from those simple comments made by Daryl Morey, who was the previous GM of the Rockets, now running, VP. He's the VP of player personnel over on the Sixers, running the entire front office there. But David Stern, right, made this a global game. He made players global, and then he allowed them to get the shoe lines. And really with this, right, boosting up TV ratings, creating larger player contracts. And then, of course, right, you're talking about the TV to NBA to franchise networks, right? You have franchises with their own TV networks. And then you have, right, the global ones like doing TV deals with TNT, like such as like that. So, I mean, he made the most money probably for any organization other than probably the next individual that we'll talk about in regards to the NFL.
Right, and that next individual, his name is Paul Tagliabue of the NFL. He added 17 new stadiums. Broadcasting fees climbed from 17.5 million to 87.5 million per team.
Yeah, I mean, just think of that, right? I mean, exactly what you just said in regards to TV, how you see it today, and how NFL is consumed. Paul made that happen, right? So I don't think, me in particular, I don't like going to NFL games. I don't like. I think there's about 11 minutes of total NFL play, right, of actual football playing.
Yeah,
then there's all this downtime. There's a tremendous amount of commercials. There's TV timeouts. There's team timeouts. So really, if you look at it, there's 11 minutes of actual football. I don't like going to games, and I'll admit that here. But what I do like is I like enjoying football on the TV. And so think about it. Paul started the NFL Network. He started all the big deals when we talk about companies like Viacom, which is CBS. You have the Walt Disney, right, which is ESPN. You have, Fox and so forth. I mean, you have all these ways to consume football, and that was started by Paul. And these are massive, massive TV deals, as you talked about it, right? You have broadcasting fees climbing from 17.5 million to 87.5 million. Like, that is in itself making the game a global game, right? Then you have the way of, I know where they were introducing NFL Europe, or they had some small teams. I know that obviously ended up dying. But then that really started this whole thing about going to Wembley and, right, playing games at Wembley. And I know the Jaguars do that a lot.
And I'm
So
not so sure you can't lay that responsibility at the feet of Roger Goodell.
Yeah. Well, now it's been that way. Of course, COVID has halted, right, the Wembley games for this year, but it's just unbelievable when you think about, how many things that Paul has done by adding all the new stadiums, by refreshing those stadiums, by bringing on, like I said, the NFL Network, which is a staple of my TV diet, and then certainly, right, just the broadcasting of these games. What it is today. I love to watch Red Zone. I think it's the single best channel in the history of sports.
So good.
But just having, the way of how we consume football today is really it's just unbelievable what he did.
We should really just have a stadium, pack it with people to watch Red Zone.
Yeah, it'd be fine with me because at least there's more than 11 minutes of actual playing. So
I mean,
I'd be
it's 8 consistent hours
of commercial-free football.
Action-packed, commercial-free football. It's quite amazing. It's like heaven on earth.
Yeah, I just a quick story there. I showed it to my girlfriend's dad. He had no idea what it was, and we proceeded to sit there for an additional 8 hours until Sunday Night Football. Then watch the game, where he decided to state that it wasn't the same way. It wasn't as good as consuming Red Zone as seeing what's happening between the 20s. But then, as you know, obviously the highlights are majority in the Red Zone, right? 20 to the TD. But then we watched the Sunday night game, which I believe at the time was Arizona versus the Cowboys. And he began to state how Red Zone was a better consumption of football than it was actual watching the game. And I have to agree. I think Red Zone is the set it and forget it. It's the Ronco of cooking appliances. You literally put that chicken in, you set it, you watch it, you don't move. Maybe you grab some beers. Maybe you watch Eat, Play, Chug on the side. I don't know. But you never have to change the channel until Sunday Night Football. And of course, as we know, it's a different watching experience.
It's like a barbecue. And with your girlfriend's dad, huh? I assume you're locked in now.
That's basically as like when you buy or purchase cable for the first time and you get into the 2-year agreement. That's what happens. You're locked in.
All right. And to discuss the NBA, we're going to bring in our NBA draft and expert analyzer, the great DOMBINO. I like to call him. Hey, Dom, how's it going? Welcome to the EPC podcast.
Dommy, since I am the NBA analyst, but thanks for having me, boys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Dom. You're our first guest, and hopefully not the last. Probably will be, though. Who knows? So, Dom, we wanted to bring you on because of your expert knowledge on the NBA. I know you do a lot of research, and, with the NBA draft up and coming, I'd like to get your perspective on some of the biggest plot lines to watch out for and what you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, this draft is kind of unlike any other. Typically in the NBA, you have, your solid can't-miss prospects, whether last year it was the Zion Williamson or, an Anthony Davis. But this year is widely viewed as a very, very weak draft class. So what's going to happen at the top is the most compelling thing because nobody really knows. Every single prospect has their flaws. Are the T-Wolves going to stay in that pick? Are the Warriors going to stay in that pick? Our team's going to trade up. So I think it'll be interesting just to see what team may come up and target someone like LaMelo Ball. I think the Suns had a lot of positive momentum from the bubble, right? They went 8-0. They're looking to make a splash. They've needed a point guard. So does it make sense for them to trade Kelly Oubre and pick swap? And for someone like the Warriors to go back to 10 and pick up one of the 3 and D players. So going to be interesting. Knicks are always a wild card. No one knows what they're going to do. They've been looking for a point guard forever as well. I think they're reckless enough to trade up and try to get someone like LaMelo Ball and see what that personality can do in New York.
I think, when you come down to like the salary cap, right? We talked about it. It's going to be dropping from 198 to 175. There's going to be a luxury tax issues for a lot of teams, but the team that's actually going to benefit the greatest is going to be Golden State, right? So now there's going to be a reduction on the amount of luxury tax that they're going to have to pay, which obviously Golden State is open to paying, but now reducing that is allowing them to use that player exception. That's 17.2. Bring over a player, maybe someone like a Kelly Oubre from the Suns, leverage that. And as well, the tax bill from the luxury tax perspective won't be as great. I think the big thing here is, right, Golden State's trying to trade back. So that's one of the teams that's definitely trying to get out. I think a lot of the teams at the top, like Dom explained, right, these teams want to get out of it because there's not as much value as there was in previous drafts. So with this is, do you select that player understanding that it's going to take, X amount of time, whereas like a team like the Warriors, does it make sense to bring someone in now because, they're ready to win now? Or is it a team like maybe, Minnesota or Charlotte or maybe Cleveland, right? Those teams are trying to rebuild, trying to figure it out. Obviously, Minnesota brought in, the point guard, and then has at least Towns. But certainly some of these teams, those are the teams that I think would go more in the youth movement. And maybe like Dom even said, right, go and take a chance on someone like LaMelo Ball and finally get your point guard.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on that, I think what you have to be looking at is these small market teams that are right on, the cusp of the playoffs, right? So they're kind of in no man's land right now where they can make the playoffs, but aren't going to really make any noise. So they're the teams that I think you have to look at that are going to make a move up to one and take that chance for a prospect they normally couldn't get. So two teams, I think, I already mentioned the Suns. They have a log jam. They could swap Oubre and get someone like a LaMelo Ball, pair him with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, which I think is a solid core. The other team is Orlando. They're kind of in the end of the Eastern Conference. They've got a log jam in their front court between Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, who actually got hurt, but Mo Bamba as well. So does it make sense for them to package Aaron Gordon, move up to maybe one or two, and then draft someone like Anthony Edwards, who has a ton of upside? That could be worth the risk for those teams, while also clearing up some cap space and a logjam at those positions.
So, Dom, what team do you think has the most to lose in this draft?
What team do I think has the most to lose? It's got to be the Warriors. The Warriors, they're in that rare spot. People like to compare them to the '99 Spurs, right? The Spurs came in last, and then they had the first pick overall and drafted Tim Duncan. So you can draw a lot of comparisons between that Spurs team and the Warriors team, but unfortunately this year, there's not that can't miss prospect. If the Warriors somehow got the number one pick last year, they have Zion, they'd be primed for another championship run. So I think it's going to be very interesting what they do. I think it makes a lot of sense to get a vet that matches their championship window. So whether that's Oubre or Gordon or anyone else, or if they stay there, do they draft James Wiseman? The Warriors never really had a center. And typically their best lineup has always been their small ball or depth lineup. They have a hole where you would need a 3-and-D wing to kind of finish games in the playoffs. But with that said, the NBA's changed. The Lakers just won last year. You may need a big man like James Wiseman to match up with Anthony Davis or the Bam Adebayos or whoever it is. Is it worth a chance if they stay at 2 and they can't find a good trade partner to take a shot on James Wiseman? He's got all the physical tools. He's got a pretty decent stroke. I think he could actually push that out and start hitting corner threes. And at 7'3", he could really anchor our defense as well as actually rebounding, which is always one of the Warriors' biggest weaknesses. So I think the Warriors, not being biased, but they are in the most compelling spot in the draft.
I think that brings up a good point too. And the question for you, Dom, I know like we were talking about, right? There's no franchise moving player. There's none that will say from a standpoint as like a generational talent like LeBron James. Not even Giannis was number one, but certainly he's not in this draft either. How do you feel the top 5 picks are going to go? And do you see any players, maybe not in the top 10 that you feel, could change a franchise today?
I don't know if there's any franchise-changing players outside of the top 10 or maybe even in this draft, to be quite honest. So I think in a weak draft what you want to do is target players that are going to have a role and be able to play in the postseason. A lot of people like Anthony Edwards. He shot 29% from three, but he's got all the physical tools. So people like the upside. Personally, I think Anthony Edwards is going to be more of a player that puts up empty stats on a bad team. Maybe a la like a Zach LaVine or like early J.R. Smith kind of guy. I mean, James Wiseman has all the tools, but the questions come, do you spend that have a pick on a big man? Big man is kind of obsolete. And, again, adding even more uncertainty to this draft is typically you get to see these guys play in the tournament. There was no NCAA tournament this year. Mm-hmm. So there's just a ton of question marks. So I think what I would be trying to do if I was the Warriors GM or any other GM, to find a player that fits your team and that can have a role on that team. I think there's a ton of good 3-and-D players. That's kind of all the rave in the NBA now. And I think there are a lot of promising prospects that could come in, play that role, and develop into, maybe a Kawhi Leonard light, right? Kawhi got drafted, I think, 14th or 16th. So he got drafted in that range. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of good players around that range that you could target. You got Saddiq Bey from Villanova, shot over 40%. He's got, a 6'6", long wingspan. So he's already got the three. He can develop. He's a very intelligent, high IQ player. So you got him. You got Devin Vessel from Florida State. Similar physical tools where he's, 6'6", 6'7", long, lengthy. Again, he shot over 40% as well. Aaron Naismith is another one. Shot over 40%, was the best three-point shooter in the NCAA last year. So those are the kind of players that I think you should be targeting that fit the modern-day NBA. But, we'll see what people do. Tyrese Halliburton's another one. Very smart, high IQ combo guard. Can rebound, can pass, also shoot as well. Kind of the Bam Adebayo comparison I like. And may butcher his name, but Onyeka Okongwu from USC. He's 6'9".
Definitely butcher that.
He's 6'9". He can switch onto guards. So I really like him fitting in the modern day NBA. And I think those are the players that you should be targeting in this draft. So
my favorite player by far, I think just the last question. Do you think because the Minnesota T-Wolves have 2 picks this year, right? So they have number 1 and I believe it is 17. Do you think they'll take 2 point guards like they did back with
Well, let's hope they do, because last time they drafted in front of us with even 1 pick and took a point guard, we got Steph Curry. So hopefully they draft LaMelo Ball first, and then we get this year's version of Steph Curry, baby.
Wasn't that Johnny Flynn, I think?
Flynn and Ricky Rubio.
That's right. There it is. Yeah.
There it is.
Wow, epic.
We'll see, but LaMelo Ball, definitely the most compelling, polarizing pick, obviously with his father and with his path to the NBA, but we'll see where he goes.
So, I mean, with a draft class like this, with no top tier, clear cut talent, I mean, it always seems like there's always like that sleeper pick that that goes in the second round and makes a name for himself. An example would be Gilbert Arenas. He was drafted in the second round, 31st overall, or Manu Ginobili was drafted in the second round, 57th overall, and or someone like Ben Wallace who went undrafted. Do you see anybody in this draft class that might go under the radar and basically who is your sleeper pick in this draft?
So I'm going to go because I think my boy Draymond Green was probably one of the most impactful second-round picks, not only ever, but definitely in the last, 15 to 20 years for what he's done. People give Steph Curry a lot of credit. And, yes, he changed the game. But so did Draymond Green, being able to defend fives and have that small ball lineup. So I'm going to go to his alma mater. I like the players that have been in the NCAA for a while. And I'm going to take Cassius Stanley from Michigan State. I think he's a smart, intelligent player, and I think he could fit a championship.
All right, Dom, thanks for joining us on this segment of NBA. Really appreciate your expertise. The DOMBINO.
Anytime. Always down to give my 2 cents on the NBA, and look forward to coming back for that free agency analyzer. So,
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh yeah.
all right. Thanks, boys.
All right. I want to thank Dom for coming on and joining us today. And I want to thank my co-host Vince again this week. Vince, what's your game of the week that you're going to watch coming up?
Yeah, so the game of the week that I'm looking at is really the Bills versus the Cardinals. So Bills coming and visiting the Cardinals. Obviously, Bills coming off a huge win at home over Seattle, made Russell Wilson slow down a bit. But then you have the Cardinals who lost at home, right, and to the Miami against Tua, who actually showed up, and to where you have these two teams really needing a win. The Bills need to keep winning and keep that momentum, and Cardinals need to win to keep pace with Seattle or actually take the lead within that division. The second one, right, Rams and Seahawks. I think these go hand in hand. You have the Rams and Seahawks. Rams must-win game, tied with the same record as the Cardinals, and the Seahawks coming off that bad loss up in Buffalo. Certainly it was cold, but they played just like it was. So I would say those two games are the ones to watch. Certainly those three teams, Cardinals, Seahawks, and Rams, have the ability to decide the NFC West this week.
Yeah, and my outside the lines take, I think I'm excited to watch the Bills Mafia kind of get back out and do their crazy shenanigan videos. Now that COVID's over, I can imagine only how much pent up energy they're about to unleash on the world. So again, thanks to all of our fans for watching still, making it through it this far. Thanks again to Vince, and we will see you guys next week.